Ancient hilltop fortresses hide a secret in their stones. Their designs evolved far faster than our history books suggest, revealing bursts of architectural genius that defy our timelines. By the end of our journey, you will see ancient engineering not as a slow crawl, but as a series of breathtaking leaps. How did societies with simple tools suddenly master complex stonework? And why do we find the same advanced features on distant continents? What single force do you think drives humanity to build its greatest achievements against impossible odds? These first hilltops were more than just high ground. They were a statement of intent. A community would gather, look at the rolling landscape, and choose the most challenging peak, not for the view, but for the sheer effort it demanded. This was a conscious decision to trade daily convenience for long-term security. Think about the physical labor required. Every log for the palisade wall, every basket of earth for the rampart, had to be hauled up steep slopes by hand. There were no pulleys, no beasts of burden to ease the burden. This immense investment in basic safety reveals something crucial about these early societies. They were thinking generations ahead. They were not just building shelters for themselves, they were establishing a stronghold for their children and their children's children. The hill itself became the first and most important component of their defense, a natural obstacle that any potential attacker would have to overcome before a single spear was thrown. This simple, powerful idea of leveraging the land itself would echo for thousands of years, its principles refined in stone and mortar on the very same peaks. But why did this basic concept spark such rapid change? What was the missing ingredient that transformed packed earth into impenetrable stone walls? That shift from earth to stone is where the mystery truly deepens. We are no longer looking at communities simply reinforcing a hilltop. We are witnessing the birth of architectural ambition on a colossal scale. This was a quantum leap in thinking. It required a society to move beyond immediate survival and invest in a project that might take generations to complete. The logistics are staggering to contemplate. First, they had to identify a suitable quarry, often miles from the building site. Then, they had to free enormous stone blocks from the earth using nothing more than wooden wedges, water, and fire. After that came the Herculean task of transport, moving multi-ton stones across rugged terrain without the wheel or draft animals. How did they do it? The most likely answer involves systems of rollers, levers, and immense manpower, a coordinated effort that points to a highly organized society with a single, powerful vision. But the final step is perhaps the most telling, the fitting of these stones. Look at the Cyclopean walls of Mycenae in Greece. These are not simple piles of rock. They are meticulously fitted blocks, so large that later generations believed only mythical giants, the Cyclopes, could have lifted them. The stones are interlocked without any mortar, their sheer weight and precise placement creating walls that have withstood millennia. This reveals a sophisticated understanding of physics and geometry that we simply do not attribute to such early eras. It was not just about stacking heavy things, it was about creating a stable, enduring structure. This sudden appearance of advanced stonework challenges our neat historical timelines. It suggests that necessity, the relentless pressure for security and a symbol of power, did not slowly cultivate these skills. Instead, it may have triggered a rapid, concentrated burst of innovation, a collective problem-solving that accelerated human knowledge far faster than we ever supposed. And if this happened in one isolated place, it would be remarkable enough, but the phenomenon appears across the world on continents that had no known contact with each other. What does this simultaneous emergence of advanced fortification tell us about humanity itself? The landscape itself became a relentless teacher, demanding solutions that flat, open land never would. In the sheer cliffs of the Andes, where the Incas built Sacsayhuaman, or the misty peaks of the Scottish Highlands, home to brocks and hill forts, the terrain presented a set of brutal, specific problems. There was no room for simple, straightforward walls. Builders had to conform to jagged ridges and precipitous drops, and in doing so, they were forced to innovate at a breathtaking pace. They did not just build on the mountain, they integrated their fortresses into its very bones. This led to the independent invention of eerily similar features across the globe. Terraced defenses, for instance, are a brilliant answer to a steep slope. Rather than a single, vulnerable wall, a series of stepped barriers creates multiple killing zones, forcing attackers to fight uphill again and again. We see this principle perfected in the Andes and emerging in the highlands of Scotland, two cultures separated by an ocean with no conceivable contact. Even the humble gateway was reimagined. A simple opening in a wall is a weak point, so builders in both regions developed complex, baffled entrances. An attacker would have to navigate a narrow, exposed passage, often turning sharp corners while defenders above rained down projectiles. This was not a slow, cultural diffusion of an idea. This was two different groups of people looking at the same fundamental problem of defending a steep approach and arriving at the same brilliant, deadly solution. This parallel development points to something profound about human ingenuity. When the pressure for survival is immense, when the stakes are the existence of a community, the human mind can leap across centuries of conventional development to find an answer. The environment did not just influence these designs, it actively accelerated them, forging architectural genius in the crucible of necessity. But if geography was the catalyst, what was the fuel that allowed these societies to undertake such monumental labor? What unseen force could command the effort of thousands, directing them to reshape entire mountainsides? The pressure to protect a community from new threats ignited an arms race of architectural genius. As offensive tactics grew more sophisticated, so too did the designs of these mountain citadels. A simple wooden wall might stop a raiding party, but it was useless against a determined army with battering rams and siege towers. Defenders had to think several moves ahead, and their response was to build in layers. The concept of the concentric castle emerged, a fortress within a fortress. Even if an attacker breached the outer curtain wall, they would find themselves trapped in a deadly killing ground, exposed to fire from an even taller, stronger inner wall. This was defense in depth, a principle so effective it appears across cultures, but the innovation did not stop there. Builders began to think in three dimensions, turning the very fabric of the fortress against its assailants. They carved narrow slits in overhanging parapets, creating what later generations would grimly call murder holes. Through these openings, defenders could drop stones or pour boiling liquids down on anyone attempting to break through the gates below. Every potential weakness in a wall became an opportunity for a countermeasure. The straight wall, vulnerable to mining or concentrated battering, was soon punctuated by projecting bastions. These strongpoints allowed defenders to shoot along the face of the wall, targeting anyone who got too close. The entire structure became an active participant in its own defense. This rapid evolution was not spread over peaceful centuries. Archaeological evidence suggests that these revolutionary features could appear, be refined, and become standard within the span of a single human life. A grandfather might have built a simple stone enclosure, while his grandson oversaw the construction of a geometrically perfect bastion designed to counter a specific new siege weapon. This compression of time is what defies our expectations. We imagine progress as a slow, steady climb, but history shows us it can be a frantic sprint, driven by the ultimate incentive, survival. And if conflict was the engine, what was the blueprint that guided these frantic, brilliant constructions? How did ancient builders, without modern mathematics, calculate the perfect angles and stress points needed to make their creations last 1,000 years? The story of Maiden Castle in Dorset reads like a blueprint for rapid evolution. What began as a simple 30-acre enclosure atop a grassy hill was transformed, within a remarkably short period, into a fortress of breathtaking complexity. Its multiple, towering ramparts were not added slowly over centuries. They were the result of a sudden, massive building campaign, a concerted effort that reshaped the entire hilltop. The scale of this project is difficult to overstate. To construct these vast earthen walls, workers moved millions of cubic feet of soil and chalk, carving the defenses directly from the hill itself. This was not a community making small improvements to their home. This was a society executing a master plan. The entrances became intricate, winding labyrinths. An attacker approaching the main gate would not face a simple opening. Instead, they would be funneled into a long, narrow passage, completely exposed to defenders positioned on high ramparts to their left and right. The entire approach was a carefully designed killing zone, a testament to strategic thinking that anticipated every move an enemy might make. Even the interior was laid out with clear organization, suggesting a level of social planning and central authority that archaeologists once believed was impossible for the Iron Age. The speed of this transformation is the true mystery. It suggests that a powerful, unifying vision emerged, one capable of mobilizing the entire population toward a single, monumental goal. This was not a slow, organic growth. It was a conscious leap forward in defensive architecture, a sudden burst of collective will that turned a hill into an unbreachable citadel. What could possibly inspire such a swift and total transformation of an entire landscape? And what does this tell us about the pressures these communities faced? This puzzle of parallel design points to a deeper mystery, one etched into the stonework itself. From the highlands of Peru to the islands of Greece, builders were employing nearly identical techniques to solve the same structural problems. How do you fit massive, irregular stones together so they hold for centuries without mortar? The answer, emerging independently across the globe, was a method we now call polygonal masonry. Instead of carving uniform, rectangular blocks, masons would carefully shape each stone to fit its neighbors like an immense, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. The resulting walls were incredibly resilient, able to shift and settle during earthquakes without collapsing. This was not a simple idea. It required a sophisticated understanding of geometry and stress distribution. Yet we find it perfected in places that, according to our maps, should have had no knowledge of one another. Even the specific angles of defensive walls show a startling uniformity. The ideal angle for a bastion to provide flanking fire seems to have been discovered and applied from Scotland to Japan. This is not a vague similarity. It is a precise architectural solution, appearing again and again. Could this be evidence of a shared ancestral knowledge that traveled with early human migrations, a foundational understanding of stone and physics that was then locally adapted? Or does it suggest that when faced with the absolute limits of material and survival, the human mind is channeled toward a set of perfect, almost mathematical solutions? The most efficient angle for defense, the most stable way to stack stone, These might be universal truths waiting to be discovered by any culture under sufficient pressure. The sheer speed of this apparent diffusion is what confounds historians. It implies a network of shared learning that operated at a pace we are only now beginning to appreciate. If these techniques were not slowly passed from one village to the next, how did they span continents almost simultaneously? What invisible thread connected these hilltop architects, guiding their hands to build in such harmonious, yet impossibly distant concert? A fortress could have the strongest walls in the world, but without water, it would fall in a matter of days. This harsh reality forced a second, profound evolutionary leap in design, one that moved defense from the perimeter to the very heart of the stronghold. The true test of a citadel was not just repelling an attack, but outlasting it. This required a shift in thinking from pure military architecture to something far more holistic, a fusion of defense and civil engineering that feels strikingly modern. The most brilliant gatehouse was useless if the people behind it were dying of thirst. So, builders began to integrate water systems directly into their blueprints from the very start. They were not simply digging a well inside a finished fortress, they were building the fortress around a guaranteed water source. This required a deep, intuitive understanding of hydrology, of reading the land to find hidden aquifers and natural springs deep beneath the rock. On a windswept hilltop, finding and accessing that water was an act of genius in itself. The wells they constructed were monumental feats of engineering, narrow shafts carved straight down through tons of solid stone, sometimes reaching depths of over 100 feet. Imagine the precision and courage required for that work, descending into the dark with simple tools to tap into the earth's veins. But securing the water was only the first step. The next was storing it. This is where we see the emergence of vast, intricate cistern systems, chambers lined with waterproof plaster, often hidden deep within the fortress foundations. These were not just buckets in a cellar, they were sophisticated reservoirs designed to collect and conserve every drop of rainwater from carefully channeled rooftops and courtyards. Some fortresses in arid regions, like Masada in the Judean desert, turned their entire plateau into a massive water catchment area, with a network of channels feeding into colossal underground chambers. This was not merely construction, it was a form of landscape alchemy, transforming a dry mountain into a self-sustaining refuge. The presence of these integrated systems tells us that the architects were planning for the worst-case scenario from day one. They were building for resilience, creating ecosystems of survival that could endure a siege lasting months or even years. This level of foresight and technical skill compresses our timeline of engineering progress dramatically. It reveals societies that were not just reacting to threats, but anticipating them with a comprehensive, systematic intelligence we rarely attribute to the ancient world. How did this knowledge of hydrology and complex construction spread so quickly, and what does it tell us about the interconnected world these builders might have inhabited? A fortress was far more than a collection of walls and towers. It was a declaration carved into the skyline, a permanent advertisement of power visible for miles in every direction. When a traveler saw the immense terraced walls of a place like Mycenae or the sprawling ramparts of Maiden Castle silhouetted against the horizon, they were not just seeing a military installation. They were witnessing the undeniable proof of a ruler who commanded the labor of thousands, who could reshape nature itself to his will. This symbolic power was arguably as important as any defensive function. A chieftain or king did not merely build a stronghold to keep people out. He built it to project his authority inward, to awe his own subjects, and to intimidate any rival who might glance toward his lands. The architecture itself became a language, and its vocabulary was scale, complexity, and permanence. Consider the sheer manpower required. To erect such monuments required a society with a surplus of food, a highly organized labor force, and a centralized authority capable of planning and executing projects that span decades. The very existence of the fortress was a boast. It said, "We are so secure, so wealthy, and so unified that we can divert our entire community's energy to this single, staggering task." This created a powerful feedback loop of architectural one-upmanship. If a neighboring ruler saw his rival's new, imposing citadel, the pressure to build something even larger, even more sophisticated, would have been immense. This was an arms race of prestige where the goal was not just to be safe, but to be seen as the most powerful, the most favored, the most unassailable. The fortress was the ultimate status symbol, its evolving design driven as much by the politics of power as by the mechanics of war. Its walls whispered a promise of protection to those inside, and a stark warning of consequence to anyone who might challenge the order it represented. Yet the most powerful designs were never confined by borders. Long-distance trade routes acted as the ancient world's information superhighway, carrying far more than spices and silks. Along these dusty paths and sea lanes traveled a priceless cargo of ideas. A merchant from the Levant might describe a revolutionary new gatehouse he saw in a foreign port to a local chieftain in Spain. A diplomat's tale of an unbreachable citadel in the east could inspire a master builder on a windswept British hilltop. This was a cross-pollination of genius, where architectural concepts could traverse continents within a few generations. The distinct notch of a crenellation, the clever angle of a bastion, the layout of a labyrinthine entrance, these were not always born from isolated necessity. Sometimes they were borrowed, adapted, and improved upon. This flow of knowledge created a connectedness we are only beginning to map, a global conversation in stone that dramatically accelerated the pace of change. An innovation that might have taken centuries to develop in isolation could now spark a breakthrough on the other side of the known world. This challenges the very idea of independent invention, suggesting that even the most remote hill fort was part of a vast, informal network of shared learning. The stones themselves whisper of these distant connections, of a time when ideas moved almost as fast as ambition itself. But the ultimate refinement in this architectural arms race was the Concentric castle, a fortress designed as a series of deadly puzzles. This was no longer a single strong wall, but an intricate sequence of barriers, each one covering the next. The genius of this layout is found in its terrifying efficiency. An attacking force that managed to breach the outer wall did not find a path to victory. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a narrow, open corridor between the outer and inner walls, a space known as a killing ground. From the towering inner walls, defenders could unleash a continuous hail of arrows and other projectiles onto the trapped soldiers below, who had no cover and nowhere to run. This design turned a moment of apparent success for the attackers into a catastrophic slaughter. A perfect example of this is Maiden Castle in Wales, a masterpiece of concentric design built in the late 13th century. Its symmetry is not for beauty, but for maximum defensive coverage. Every inch of the outer ward is covered by the higher inner ward, creating a perfect, inescapable field of fire. To conceive of such a structure required more than just a talent for building. It demanded a deep, almost mathematical understanding of sightlines, angles, and the physics of projectile motion. The architects were thinking in 3 dimensions, calculating how to create overlapping zones of death that left no safe approach. The fact that this incredibly complex concept was not only designed but also constructed with such precision, and then replicated across different kingdoms with startling speed, reveals an astonishingly dynamic exchange of military ideas. It speaks of a world where master builders and military engineers were sharing blueprints and lessons learned, accelerating the evolution of defense far beyond what any isolated culture could have achieved on its own. This was not a slow, cautious improvement. It was a sudden, brilliant leap in strategic thought, permanently etched in stone. Behind every leap in defensive design was a quieter revolution in the laboratory of the landscape. The stones themselves were only part of the story, their strength dependent on the invisible glue that held them together. Early builders used simple clay or mud mortar, but as walls grew taller and more ambitious, these basic mixtures failed. The pressure for more resilient structures sparked a deliberate search for better binders, a quest that transformed simple construction into a form of applied chemistry. They discovered that by heating limestone to a high temperature, they could produce quicklime, a caustic powder that, when mixed with water and sand, underwent a miraculous transformation. It hardened into a stone-like substance, bonding the masonry with a grip that could withstand centuries of weather and warfare. This was not a happy accident. It was a controlled chemical process mastered through trial, observation, and a growing understanding of material properties. The quality of this lime mortar became a critical factor in a fortress's longevity, and recipes were guarded as closely as any military secret, but the innovation did not stop there. In some regions, builders made an even more profound discovery. By adding volcanic ash or crushed pottery to their lime mixture, they created a mortar that could even set underwater, a material with properties startlingly close to modern concrete. The Romans would later perfect this recipe, but its early, experimental use in harbor fortifications and cisterns reveals a relentless drive to push the boundaries of the possible. This mastery of materials was the essential enabler. It gave architects the confidence to design taller towers, wider spans, and more complex vaults, knowing their ambitious blueprints would not collapse under their own weight. The rapid evolution of fortress design was, in a very real sense, built upon this foundation of chemical and geological ingenuity. So if the flow of ideas provided the inspiration, and the mastery of materials provided the means, what was the final, human element that brought these monumental projects to life? What kind of mind could look at a mountain and see not just a stronghold, but a masterpiece of engineering? These master builders were the original systems thinkers, looking at a mountain and seeing not just rock, but structure, logistics, and flow. They were likely a unique fusion of military strategist, geologist, and project manager, their minds capable of calculating stress loads and labor requirements with an intuition that feels almost superhuman to us today. Their training remains one of history's great silences, passed down not in written manuals but through apprenticeship and hands-on experience. A young person would have learned by doing, by mixing mortar, by setting stones, by observing how a wall settles over its first winter. This was knowledge earned through physical labor and keen observation, a deep, practical wisdom that understood the personality of the local stone and the secrets of a stable foundation. Their status in society must have been immense. To command a workforce of thousands for a project that spanned decades required more than just skill, it required immense authority. These individuals were likely revered, their word final on the building site. They were the guardians of a sacred, practical trust, the ones responsible for ensuring the entire community's survival. This high status also granted them something priceless: mobility. A master builder whose fortress withstood a famous siege would have found his reputation traveling far ahead of him. He might be invited by a distant king, offered riches and honor to design a new citadel. In this way, the master builder became a vessel, carrying the latest architectural innovations across vast distances. His arrival in a new land would have been an event, bringing with him new techniques for gateways, water systems, and mortar recipes. This circulation of genius explains the rapid, almost simultaneous appearance of advanced features across disparate cultures. It was not that the idea of a baffled entrance spontaneously emerged in two places at once, but that a single brilliant mind, or a school of such minds, carried that solution from one hilltop to another, adapting it to the local terrain. The speed of this architectural evolution was not magic. It was the work of individuals whose names are lost to time, but whose legacy is written in the enduring stones that still crown our ancient hills. The rock fortress of Sigiriya erupts from the Sri Lankan jungle, a monument to concentrated human genius. Built in the 5th century, this colossal stone pillar was transformed into an unbreachable palace within a remarkably short period, perhaps just 2 decades. Its very existence compresses a millennium of architectural evolution into a single, breathtaking project. The ambition is staggering, a citadel that fuses palace, fortress, and water gardens on a near-vertical rock face, defying every assumption about the technological limits of its age. This was not a slow, generational project, but a master plan executed with breathtaking speed under a single, powerful vision. The king who commissioned it, Kasyapa, sought not just security, but a statement of divine authority carved into the sky itself. The approach to the summit is a journey through layered defense and artistry. Visitors would first navigate intricate water gardens at the base, a display of serene control, before beginning the ascent up a staircase flanked by massive lion's paws carved from the living rock, a symbolic gateway to a royal domain. Halfway up the cliff face, a sheltered gallery houses the famous Sigiriya frescoes, vibrant portraits that have endured for over 1,500 years. Just beyond them runs the mirror wall, so highly polished that the king could see his reflection as he walked beside it. This seamless combination of hydraulic engineering, defensive architecture, and artistic expression reveals a society capable of multidisciplinary thinking on a grand scale. They were not just building walls, they were crafting an entire ecosystem of power, beauty, and resilience, all conceived and constructed within the span of a single human life. What kind of social organization, what depth of knowledge, could possibly enable such a rapid and complete transformation of a natural wonder into an engineered marvel? A changing climate could forge a fortress from fear and desperation. When stable weather patterns shifted, turning fertile lands to dust or drowning coasts in relentless rain, the very foundations of society were shaken. This was not a slow decline, but a cascade of crises. A prolonged drought might decimate crops, leading to famine. This scarcity would inevitably push desperate groups to raid their neighbors, sparking cycles of conflict over what little remained. In this crucible of environmental and social collapse, the need for a secure refuge became a matter of survival for entire communities, not just a strategic advantage for a ruling class. The response was a surge of collective action unlike any other. Faced with an existential threat, people who might have been rivals just years before would pool their knowledge, their labor, and their resources. The slow, generational project of fortifying a hilltop was no longer an option. It had to happen now. This shared urgency compressed time itself, turning what might have been a century of gradual architectural experimentation into a single, frantic decade of construction. Imagine the scene, not of slaves driven by a whip, but of families working side by side, understanding that the wall they raised today might be all that stood between their children and oblivion tomorrow. This was innovation born from absolute necessity, a desperate race against a changing world that forced brilliant, practical solutions to emerge at a breathtaking pace. The very design of these crisis-born fortresses often reflects their origins, favoring sheer, imposing scale and rapid construction over more refined, decorative elements. They were built for one purpose: to be a final, unbreachable sanctuary when the world outside fell into chaos. This pattern repeats across the archaeological record, suggesting that some of the most dramatic leaps in ancient engineering were not the fruits of peaceful prosperity, but the direct result of societies confronting and overcoming their greatest challenges. These towering structures were a form of psychological warfare long before the first assault. Their immense scale was a deliberate message to any approaching army, a visual calculation designed to sap morale and will. An army looking up at a fortress like Mycenae with its colossal Cyclopean blocks was not just seeing a wall. They were facing the undeniable proof of a society's unity, resources, and determination. The very sight forced a grim assessment. Was the certain cost of attacking this place worth the uncertain reward? This psychological pressure became a critical factor in the fortress's defense, a non-lethal weapon integrated into its design. Architects quickly learned that a fortress did not only need to be strong, it needed to appear utterly unconquerable. This led to an arms race of intimidation. Builders began to emphasize features that exaggerated height and inaccessibility. They constructed soaring, sheer curtain walls that offered no visible handholds. They designed gateways that were not just defensible, but that looked like the jaws of a stone beast, dark and forbidding. The strategic use of light and shadow played a part, with overhanging parapets creating a perpetual gloom at the base of the walls, making them feel even more immense and oppressive to anyone standing below. This was strategic communication carved in stone, a language of power and permanence that evolved just as quickly as the physical defenses. A more complex, layered facade did not just provide more angles for defenders, it sent a clearer message to observers: this place is a labyrinth of death, and you will not find your way out. The evolution of these designs was driven as much by the need to win the mental battle as the physical one, proving that the most powerful fortress was one that could convince its enemies to simply turn around and go home. The thunder of the cannon should have been the death knell for the high stone fortress. A projectile that could smash through walls that had stood for centuries made medieval battlements look suddenly fragile, a relic of a bygone age. Yet the story does not end with the obsolescence of the castle. It pivots into one of the most dramatic and rapid reinventions in architectural history. Faced with a weapon that could level their greatest achievements, builders did not surrender. They observed, they learned, and they began to build back smarter. The towering, majestic walls that had dominated skylines for 1,000 years began to shrink, sinking lower into the ground. Height, once the ultimate advantage, became a liability, a bigger target for enemy gunners. In its place, a new principle emerged: thickness. Walls became immense, sloping banks of earth and stone, designed not to be elegant but to absorb a brutal impact. A cannonball would slam into these massive, resilient ramparts and sink in, its energy dissipated rather than shattering the masonry. But the most revolutionary change was one of geometry. The familiar round tower, a weak point against concentrated cannon fire, was replaced by the angular bastion. These sharp, projecting points were strategically placed along the walls, creating a web of interlocking fire. From a bastion, defenders could train their own cannons to sweep the entire length of the adjacent wall, ensuring that no attacker could approach without being exposed to a devastating crossfire. The entire fortress footprint morphed into a star-like shape, a design so efficient it spread across Europe and into colonial outposts with breathtaking speed. This was not a slow, reluctant change. It was a wholesale reimagining of defense, a complete paradigm shift compressed into a handful of generations. The very principles that had governed fortress design for a millennium were torn up and rewritten. proving that human ingenuity, when pressed, can evolve faster than any weapon. This pattern of forgotten genius presents one of history's most profound puzzles. Why would a society master an incredibly difficult architectural technique, use it brilliantly, and then simply let the knowledge vanish from their culture? The sophisticated corbelled arch, a masterpiece of stone balancing where each layer projects slightly inward until the gap is bridged at the top, appears in magnificent structures from Neolithic tombs to Mycenaean treasuries. It is a solution that requires immense skill and a deep understanding of structural forces. Yet, in many places, this technology was perfected, used for a few generations, and then completely abandoned. The knowledge of how to build it was lost, sometimes for centuries, until it was later rediscovered by an entirely different civilization. This points to a startling reality that architectural progress is not a one-way street. It can be a fragile flame, easily extinguished, a period of social collapse, a devastating conflict, or even a simple shift in priorities as a society moves from building monumental tombs to focusing on fortified cities, can sever the chain of apprenticeship. The master builders who held the intricate knowledge in their minds might pass on without teaching their successors, and the technique dies with them. These abandoned technologies are not failures, they are ghostly echoes. They remind us that the timeline of human innovation is not a smooth, steady climb, but a landscape of brilliant, isolated peaks, some of which would not be reached again for 1,000 years. What does this tell us about the nature of discovery itself? And could it be that some of our own modern advancements are just rediscoveries of ancient, lost truths? The true marvel of these hilltop fortresses lies not just in their grand designs, but in the silent, monumental effort that brought them to life. Visualize a mountain transformed into a bustling, open-air factory, humming with a level of organization that rivals any modern corporation. The master builder's vision was nothing without the thousands of hands that hauled the stone, mixed the mortar, and shaped the landscape. This was a feat of logistics as profound as the architecture itself, a hidden engine of coordinated human effort. To sustain a workforce of thousands for years, even decades, required a society with a surplus of food and a sophisticated system for its distribution. Someone had to calculate the daily caloric needs of every laborer, organize supply chains for grain and water, and establish shelters for the workers. This was not a chaotic mob, but a carefully managed machine, with specialized roles for quarrymen, transporters, masons, and carpenters. The project scale reveals a startling truth. These societies possessed administrative and managerial skills that we rarely attribute to the ancient world. The ability to plan, to allocate resources, and to maintain morale over such a long period is a clear indicator of a complex hierarchical social structure. It suggests the existence of scribes keeping detailed records, of overseers coordinating daily tasks, and of a central authority powerful enough to command this collective energy. This logistical prowess was the indispensable foundation. It allowed a brilliant idea conceived in one mind to be translated, with breathtaking speed, into miles of unbreachable walls that would stand for millennia. The stones are the legacy, but the true genius was in the orchestration of the community itself, a symphony of effort that turned a single vision into an enduring reality. How can we be so certain that these fortresses evolved at a breakneck pace? The proof is locked within the very materials used to build them. Archaeologists now employ precise scientific methods to read this hidden timeline. Dendrochronology, the study of tree ring patterns, can date a wooden lintel or support beam to the exact year it was cut down. Similarly, radiocarbon dating measures the decay of organic materials found in construction layers, like charcoal from ancient cooking fires or fragments of animal bone mixed into mortar. These techniques provide hard data, transforming educated guesses into a precise calendar of construction. The findings are consistently startling. At many sites, what appears to be centuries of layered development is revealed to be the work of a single, concentrated building phase. A simple earthen rampart might be replaced by a complex stone wall not over 10 generations, but within the lifetime of a single ruler. This scientific evidence shatters the traditional model of slow, incremental growth. It forces us to abandon the image of patient, generational improvement and replace it with one of urgent, revolutionary change. The archaeological record becomes a story of sudden leaps, where a community's entire defensive strategy was reimagined and rebuilt in a historical blink of an eye. This data forms the unshakable bedrock of our new understanding, confirming that the rapid evolution of hilltop fortifications was not a rare exception, but a recurring pattern across the globe. If the stones could talk, they would tell tales not of slow progress, but of frantic, brilliant adaptation. The comforting arc of history as a steady upward climb simply does not fit the evidence. We are taught to see human advancement as a slow, cumulative process, where each generation builds patiently upon the last. But the stones of these ancient strongholds tell a very different story, one of long, quiet plateaus shattered by frantic, brilliant leaps. This pattern mirrors a concept from biology known as punctuated equilibrium, where species remain stable for eons, only to be transformed by sudden, rapid evolutionary bursts. The architectural timeline of a fortress is not a smooth, rising line. It is a flat line that suddenly, dramatically spikes upward. For centuries, a simple wooden palisade might suffice, its design unchanging. Then, within a single lifetime, that entire structure is torn down and replaced with a complex stone citadel featuring revolutionary gateways and integrated water systems. What could possibly cause such a dramatic rupture in the established order? The catalyst was rarely a single factor, but a perfect storm of pressures. A charismatic and powerful new leader could unite a population behind a monumental vision, channeling collective energy into a single, audacious project. Or more darkly, the arrival of a terrifying new enemy, armed with unfamiliar siege tactics, could force a desperate race for survival, compressing a century of defensive innovation into a few frantic years. Sometimes it was a quiet breakthrough in a quarry or a lime kiln, a new mortar recipe or stone working technique that suddenly made the impossible seem achievable. Accepting this model changes everything. It forces us to see history not as a predictable march, but as a dynamic and unpredictable landscape, punctuated by moments of dazzling creativity that reshaped the world in a geological blink of an eye. Human progress, it seems, is not a slow burn, but a series of brilliant, concentrated flashes. These recurring patterns across continents are too consistent to be mere coincidence. In Japan, the transition from simple yamashiro, or mountain castles, to the sprawling stone complexes of the Edo period mirrors the same explosive growth we see in European hill forts. Both began with earthworks and wooden palisades clinging to a summit, and both evolved into intricate stone fortresses with layered defenses, all within a remarkably compressed time frame. Even the symbolic language is echoed. The imposing, sloped stone walls of a Japanese castle, designed to intimidate and withstand earthquakes, find their conceptual twin in the Cyclopean masonry of Mycenae, each using sheer, awe-inspiring scale to project an image of unshakable power. This was not a shared blueprint, but a shared human instinct. When the need for security becomes absolute, the architectural solutions begin to converge. The development of the gate complex is a perfect example of this universal response. Whether it is the complex Masugata gate of a Japanese castle creating a box-shaped killing zone, or the baffled entrance of a Scottish broch, the principle is identical. Force any approaching enemy into a confined, exposed space where they can be targeted from multiple angles. This parallel evolution points to a deep-seated logic in defensive strategy, a kind of universal engineering grammar that emerges independently when survival is on the line. By studying these global threads, we can start to separate the unique cultural flourishes, like the elegant curved roofs of Japan, from the fundamental, cross-cultural responses to universal threats. It reveals that beneath our diverse histories, we are connected by a common drive to protect, to project power, and to solve the same existential puzzles. This global tapestry weaves a story not of isolated genius, but of a shared human capacity for rapid, brilliant adaptation. A ruler's ambition could no longer be contained by stark military walls. The fortress began a final transformation, evolving from a grim sentinel into a breathtaking fusion of power and poetry, a place where defense and artistry were woven into a single, seamless tapestry. This was the birth of the fortified palace, a structure that served as both an unbreachable stronghold and the brilliant, beating heart of an entire kingdom. Look at the Alhambra in Spain, perched like a crown upon its hill. From the outside, its formidable ramparts speak a clear language of military might, a warning to any who would challenge its authority. But step inside its gates and the message transforms entirely. You enter a world of serene, sun-drenched courtyards, where the gentle sound of water flows through intricate channels, and every arch is framed by stone carved into lace. This was not merely a castle with nicer rooms. It was a complete architectural ecosystem, where the need for security was perfectly balanced with the desire for beauty, tranquility, and the sophisticated administration of a realm. The same synthesis unfolds at India's Gwalior Fort, its vast plateau housing not just barracks and armories, but magnificent temples, ornate palaces, and elaborate water reservoirs. This shift from a purely defensive outpost to a multi-functional capital city represents one of the most sophisticated leaps in ancient planning. It required architects to become masters of synthesis, blending the brutal requirements of warfare with the delicate needs of daily life, governance, and spiritual practice. They had to design a structure that could withstand a siege while also hosting courtly ceremonies, that could house soldiers while also inspiring poets. Achieving this complex integration of functions, and achieving it within a few short generations, marks a pinnacle of human ingenuity. The fortress had finally become more than a shield. It had become a living symbol of a civilization itself, resilient, cultured, and enduring. The ghost of the ancient fortress lives on, not in crumbling stone, but in the blueprints of our modern world. That fundamental drive for security, perfected on those windy hilltops, has been translated into a new language of steel, concrete, and digital code. The principle of strategic sighting is everywhere you look. A modern military base is not placed for convenience, but for control of key terrain, offering clear lines of sight and a defensive advantage, mirroring the logic of a hillfort chieftain surveying his domain. Even the design of a secure data center, a fortress for information, follows the same ancient playbook. It is often situated in a geographically stable, low-profile area, protected by layers of security that progress from a simple perimeter fence to biometric scanners at its heart, a direct echo of the concentric castles and their deadly killing grounds. This is not a vague resemblance, it is the continuation of a timeless strategic imperative. Our own urban planning is deeply indebted to these early innovators. The concept of defensible space, where the very design of a neighborhood, its lighting, its sightlines, and its access points, can discourage conflict and create a sense of territorial control, is a direct descendant of the psychological warfare waged by ancient ramparts. We still build to control flow, to create barriers, and to establish a sense of unbreachable authority, recognizing the breathtaking speed at which our ancestors developed these ideas gives them a new power. It reminds us that the security concepts we take for granted are not modern inventions, but the refined legacy of ancient genius, solutions born from necessity that have stood the test of millennia. Yet for all the patterns we can trace and the timelines we have compressed, the most intimate voices from this era remain silent. We can map the grand scale of a refortification project, but what specific alarm, what sudden shift in power sparked the frantic labor that reshaped an entire hill? Was it the arrival of a scout with news of a new, terrifying weapon in a rival's hands? Was it a prolonged drought that forced desperate migrations, bringing new conflicts to their doorstep? The catalyst for each great leap remains a ghost in the machinery, a single event lost to time that set thousands of hands to work. And what of the architects themselves? Their blueprints, their calculations, their failed experiments and triumphant breakthroughs were likely recorded on perishable materials, wood or parchment, that have long since returned to the earth. Without their personal notes, we are left to reverse engineer their genius from the stones alone, admiring the final symphony without knowing the individual notes that composed it. This is where the future of discovery lies. Emerging technologies are poised to listen for these echoes. Advanced LiDAR scanning can now peer through dense forest canopies to reveal the faintest earthworks, hidden for centuries, mapping entire fortified landscapes we never knew existed. Artificial intelligence, trained to recognize the subtle patterns of human construction, could sift through this colossal new dataset, identifying sites and construction phases at a speed and scale impossible for the human eye. These tools do not just promise to find more ruins, they offer a chance to read the land itself like a historical document, uncovering the logistical networks, the quarry roads, and the satellite settlements that fed these colossal projects. The story of the Hilltop fortress is not a closed book. It is a manuscript with missing pages, and every new scan, every new algorithmic insight has the potential to restore a paragraph, a chapter, or even rewrite our understanding of the entire narrative. The tempo of history, it turns out, may be even more dynamic and surprising than we have yet dared to suppose. These stone sentinels, therefore, are far more than crumbling relics. They are a dynamic archive of human ambition, a testament to our species' profound capacity for rapid, transformative change when confronted with necessity, competition, and a powerful vision. Our journey from simple earthen ramparts to the geometric genius of star forts reveals a timeline not of slow ascent, but of breathtaking leaps, conflict, environment, and the relentless drive for symbolic power compressed centuries of development into single generations. This exploration offers a crucial reminder that our potential for sudden, brilliant adaptation is one of the most powerful constants in our entire history. If this journey through accelerated time has captivated you, we would love to hear which fortress mystery intrigues you the most. Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more deep dives into the enduring puzzles of our